My beloved child, listen. What you thought was silence was the hush of heaven leaning in. You believed you were alone, but I was nearer than the breath that filled your chest. I watched the nights you could not sleep, the prayers that seemed to vanish into the dark, the seasons that felt empty and wasted, and I saw a story being written you could not yet read. Every tear, every ache, every moment that felt like loss was not a mistake. It was preparation. It was an unseen making. You did not fail. You endured. You stayed when it would have been easier to harden. You loved when it would have been natural to turn cold. When faith thinned to a single fragile thread, you held it. That is the shape of true victory. That is what passing looks like when the test is invisible to the world. I was watching the way you rose after you fell. I watched the quiet courage of your small choices. I watched you choose forgiveness instead of vengeance, humility instead of proving yourself, trust instead of the easy arrogance of certainty. You passed, not because you were perfect, but because you persevered. I know you asked why answers took so long. You wondered if I had turned away. The silence was not absence. It was trust. I trusted you with the test because I already knew the outcome. I already knew you would choose me when everything else failed. I gave you room to choose me without applause, to love me without trophies, to obey me without the eyes of men. That is loyalty. That is a heart that will carry more than fortune. So I kept silent to see if your commitment was to me, or to the comfort that comes with applause. You walked through fire and did not burn. The flames stripped what could not endure, and the refining revealed the gold beneath your ashes. What felt like breaking was actually birthing. What felt like a loss was removal of what would have crowded out destiny. I was pruning, not punishing. I was removing small, comfortable things so I could give you a hand large enough to hold greatness. When a gardener prunes, he does not hate the plant. He loves it enough to make it fruitful. So I cut away the dead weight so what remained could bear abundance. I saw you in moments no one else saw. I saw you cry in secret and still stand up in the morning. I heard the prayers whispered in the dark, the questions you were too ashamed to voice. God, are you with me? You asked. Yes, and I whispered back, I see you. Keep walking. Even when you could not feel me, you moved forward. That movement, that obedience in spite of feeling abandoned, was your answer. You did not obey for reward. You obeyed because of the posture of your heart. Heaven records posture before performance. There were doors that closed. You felt them like slams in the night. You grieved those closings, not knowing they were shelter. Each closed door protected the future I was keeping for you. A door left open can drain a life. A door closed can preserve a destiny. I shut what would have distracted you, what would have stolen your strength, what would have entangled you in lesser things. When one season seemed to end and you mourned, it was because a greater season was being readied behind the scenes. You thought I took, but I made room. You thought I withheld, but I was guarding. You asked why some relationships ended and some opportunities vanished, not because your path was cursed, but because I was aligning you with what belonged to you. Some companions would have pulled you off course. Some plans would have settled you where you could not grow. I know the sting of letting go because I let go for your good. I called you to surrender, not to punish, but to prepare. The letting go was the test of your willingness to trust me with what you cherished. You passed that test. You proved you will receive a blessing without letting it claim your heart. When the world measured success by visibility, you learned to worship invisibly. You learned to pray when no one was listening. You learned to give where no one could applaud. Those hidden acts, the quiet service, the unnoticed mercy, the private surrender, are the currency of heaven. I was building in you a capacity for blessing that money, fame, or favor cannot buy. I was fashioning a heart that will not collapse under the pressure of blessing because it has been tested in the furnace of absence. You wanted rescue. I wanted transformation. You wanted answers. I wanted character. Your obedience in secret is what now opens what you prayed for publicly. Every act of faith in the dark lit something in the unseen realm. Angels noticed. They rejoiced when you chose faithfulness over ease. They watched you resist bitterness and clapped when you offered love instead. The spiritual realm keeps score not by applause but by faithfulness. Your small yeses became a ladder, rung by rung, leading to the promises you could not see yet. You protested that you obeyed and still suffered. That sting is real, and I will not gloss over it. Obedience does not always mean immediate reward. Sometimes obedience is the seed that will sprout in a season you cannot yet enter. There were lessons you could only learn in the dry places. There were muscles in your soul that could only grow when you carried weight. I knew the wisdom you needed could not come from comfort. I placed you in the school of solitude until you learned to find me without distraction. In the wilderness you discovered I am sufficient. In scarcity, you found generosity. In silence, you learned to hear my voice. You called your season wilderness. I called it refinement. You called it abandoned. I called it chosen. The stripping away was not to bankrupt you, but to prepare you. I was not unkind. I was purposeful. I removed the things that would keep your blessing small. I removed pride until humility became your companion. I removed dependency until trust in me became your foundation. These were not random losses. They were carefully placed removals so that the things I give next will fit the hands I have shaped. There were nights when you begged for immediate restoration and I said no. You thought I delayed out of indifference, but I delayed because timing matters. You asked for increase before your vessel was ready. I could not pour what you could not hold without breaking what I intended to build. I wait because I love you too much to give you early and watch it wreck your soul. The delay is mercy. It keeps blessings from falling into unprepared hands. It protects you from the collapse that sudden favor can bring to a heart unanchored. You learned to pray not out of convenience, but from necessity. You learned to seek when there was nothing else to seek. Desperation taught you dependence. When you were stripped, you became teachable. The humbling that once humiliated eventually made you humble enough to carry honor righteously. Pride had to be broken so grace could sit at the center of your identity. You are not my child because of your achievements. You are my child because of my love. That truth had to be made more than an idea. It had to live in the marrow of your faith. You asked, "Why the pain, Lord?" And that is an honest prayer. I heard it. Suffering was not a punishment, but a refinement. I burned away what hindered the glow I intended for you. Fire does not consume gold. It cleanses it. You became more luminous not by avoiding trouble, but by passing through it. You were carried through, not crushed. Where you expected to be destroyed, you were remade. What you thought was the end was only the bent part of the path where I turned you toward your destiny. I saw the sorrow in your hands when they were empty and the fierce gratitude when they were filled with nothing but faith. The emptiness taught you to hold me, not things. This root, the root of identity in me, is what will let you stand when storms come again. Others gain crowns for trophies. I crown you for endurance. The one who can praise in the pit is the one who will steward abundance without collapsing into fear or entitlement. You could not see how far your hidden faith spread. Every private act shaped eternity. Your mercy, whispered praise, and secret fast were not wasted. They sent ripples into the spiritual currents that cannot be measured by human eyes. The unseen realm rearranged to answer the quiet faith you gave. These rearrangements are now reaching your life. The season of pruning is giving way to the season of promise. Heaven is moving on your behalf. I am unsealing what you sowed in tears and faith. Where there was lack, restoration. Where there was delay, acceleration. Where silence muffled your prayers, songs of joy will rise. The angels who watched you all this time now prepare a welcome for your breakthrough. They are not spectators. They are attendants arranging the pathways and shifting the atmospheres that will bring your blessings to pass. The doors that were closed will swing open in ways you cannot orchestrate. What you did not know how to build, I will place in your lap. This is not simply a transfer of resources. It is a repositioning of your life into alignment with what you were made for. Relationships that were fractured will be healed and aligned to your purpose. Doors that were blocked will open to corridors you did not know existed. Opportunities that once seemed like fantasies will become context for your gifts. Peace will settle in places once loud with chaos. But beyond the gifts, you will notice who you became in the process. That person should be the greater prize, stronger, gentler, wiser, ready. You asked, "Why me? Why such hard teaching?" Because few are willing to stay with the test long enough to be transformed by it. Many run from difficulty. Few remain to learn the language of heaven. You stayed. You believed when belief was a painful discipline. That faith is now your credential. It proves you can steward blessing and not let it steal your soul. It proves you can lead without using people. It proves you will not compromise when the pressure comes. The heart that passes the hardest test receives not only what it prayed for, but also the authority to carry it well. You are being prepared to carry more than just comfort. You are being prepared to carry purpose. I needed you to be able to receive my gifts without being claimed by them. I needed you to understand that blessings are not meant to be anchors but tools. If I had given you wings before your spirit had learned humility, you would have flown in pride and fallen. So I built wings in the dark until you learned to fly by faith rather than by the approval of men. Do you remember the moments you were tempted to turn bitter? I saw the struggle and cheered when you chose love instead. You gave mercy where resentment would have been understandable. That mercy was not weakness, it was warfare in the spirit. Bitterness opens a door to decay, mercy shuts it. You did not know that every time you forgave, chains fell. Every time you walked away from a fight you could have won, you dismantled a trap. You thought it was surrender. It was wisdom. You thought silence was cowardice. It was restraint. Heaven applauded when you chose peace over pride. There were sacrifices that made no sense then. You let go of people and plans that felt like destiny, and in their place, I placed better. Not because the old was bad, but because the old would have been small for the person you would become. I removed what was too tight so new garment of destiny could be tailored to you. You mourned endings not knowing you were being spared future ruin. This is the mercy of mindful timing. I do not give everything you ask for at once because I see the whole map you cannot see. You were taught intimacy with me because there are things only the broken can learn, how to plead, how to listen, how to bend. Intimacy does not grow in the bright room of success. It grows in the low-lit trench of need. There you found my voice, not as a loud command, but as a whisper that steadied your heart. You discovered that your identity is not in the applause, but in being my child. That discovery will guard your soul when the applause comes. I know the nights you wept, repeating the same lament. Why did this happen? I heard every repetition and redeemed it. Your questions were not ignored. They were held and folded into a response that would make sense in season. Some explanations cannot be given until the change is visible because the full answer depends on the outcome I am arranging. It would be cruel to explain the why before the when. So I hold back a bit longer than your impatience would prefer so that the explanation will land as a celebration, not a lesson. You have been given spiritual muscle through hardship. Muscle grows under strain. You are more able now to carry authority without anger, to give advice without pride, to lead without manipulation. You learned patience because you had nothing left to replace waiting. You learned endurance because you had to. These virtues will serve you as trophies of growth, not as marks of suffering. They will be used to bless others and to steward the very gifts you receive. When restoration comes, it will not be a mere return to your former place. It will be multiplication. What was once in mercy restored will increase. Loss will not be answered with a flat recompense but with abundance that makes you a conduit. The overflow is not for your ego. It is so you can be a blessing. The vineyard that survived winter bears fruit not just to survive but to feed villages. That is how I intend to use your story. It will not end with you. Your victory will become a pathway for others. You asked if your perseverance mattered. It did. Every time you said yes when your body wanted to say no, a promise warmed a little closer to coming. Every time you stayed faithful in a small thing, a larger thing was entrusted to you. Heaven measures faithfulness by constancy, not size. The faithful steward of little will be trusted with much. You have been faithful in the hidden places, and that faithfulness is the key that opens the visible storehouse. You did not grow in a vacuum. I was active. Not in ways that always relieved you, but in ways that always refined you. I molded your character with intentional hands. You learned boundaries, not because I wished to punish, but because I wanted you to be safe. You learned to protect your heart, not to shut down other people, but to invite only what would build and not steal. You learned discernment because the road ahead requires wise choices. Each quiet lesson was a scaffold for the architecture of your future life. And now, the season is changing. The silence breaks. The waiting yields. The doors that once seemed impenetrable will open. The restoration will be more than you remember. It will be better than you hoped. Healed relationships will return with new depth. Opportunities aligned to purpose will move toward you quickly, as though the clock itself hastens on your behalf. The sound of breakthrough is not a whisper, it is an orchestration. Prepare to witness rhythms of favor, moments where the pieces you thought lost will return, multiplied. But remember this, the greater gift is not merely what comes to you, but what you will now become. The humility, compassion, and strength forged in private will be your surety in public. You will carry the breakthrough with responsibility. You will be given favor and the wisdom to steward it for others. The test was not to humble you for its own sake, but to humble you so you would not be harmed by what follows. Stand still and lift your eyes. Watch what I will do. The angels who once watched with concern now prepare with celebration. They have been arranging details you cannot imagine. Doors opening, debts being cleared, encounters orchestrated, words set to fall into hearts at the right moment. What you have sown in faith will begin to yield in visible ways. What was once a whisper in your prayers will become a chorus of testimony, and when the blessing arrives, receive it with a heart that remembers the refining. Do not let gratitude be drowned by greed. Do not let prominence make you forget the quiet hours when you clung to me in the dark. Let your blessing be fuel for generosity. Use what you receive to pull others out of their wilderness. Let your story become a lamp for the path of someone who is still learning to hold faith by a thread. I did not give you trials to punish you. I gave them to prepare you, to educate your heart in ways prosperity cannot. The hardest test is over. You passed. The fire did its refining work. The silence was shaping your ears to hear truth. The waiting trained your feet to move by trust rather than sight. You passed not because life became easier, but because you became stronger. Now, watch heaven unlock. Watch the tangle of delays untie. Watch restoration spread like dawn. Where there was lack, abundance. Where there was loss, restoration and multiplication. Where you felt unseen, you will be known in a way that honors the journey you undertook. All those private acts of obedience, love, and mercy will be remembered. They were never wasted. They were seeds that grew in a soil only I can cultivate. You passed. The final and hardest test is complete. You were chosen in the quiet and prepared for the public. Angels are at work. Doors will open that no man can close. Your story will pivot into a chapter of increase and purpose. Be ready to steward it well, to love larger, to give wider, to carry what you are given with humility and compassion. You are not the same. You are made new, refined, and appointed. Now stand firm, walk into what I have prepared. Keep the posture that passed the test. Faith without proving, love without bartering, obedience without applause. The world will see the change. But remember, the source is the furnace you endured, and the God whose hands did not let you fall. Rejoice, for the hardest hour has ended and the greatest chapter has begun.